But first, today I think the penny is just starting to drop about this virus. Now don't get me wrong, this virus can kill. Today the death toll went up by 1 to 19. Yet again someone very old, a Tasmanian man in his 80s. In fact, every single one of the dead so far has been old. The youngest was 68, but he had serious medical conditions. Others were mostly much older and were dying, many of them, already of diseases such as cancer or were seriously ill. And just 19 deaths in 3.5 weeks since our first one puts the lie to headlines from newspapers last week or the week before saying fears that 150,000 may die. Well, that's not going to happen. In fact, the spread of the virus has slowed. It was up to 35% of new cases every day, but in the last 2 days it's been down to around 7%. Yes, it's still too high, I know that, and still a long way to go. And more people will die. 50 are in intensive care. But even there's a silver lining, because that means that in no way do we look like running out of intensive care beds in just 4 days' time, which was last week's scare. So, as I say, the penny is starting to drop. The danger of this virus, wildly exaggerated. It is dangerous. Let me repeat, it is dangerous, but not as dangerous as we're still being told. Drama sells, I guess. But our reaction to this virus has been devastating, worse than you could have predicted. Restrictions so far that have put more than 100,000 people out of work, with many more to come. So that around the country now we have breadwinners who've just lost their jobs, losing their savings, they've been humiliated, and they're not even allowed to go out. Many of those homes will now be pressure cookers, stewing in absolutely dangerous frustration. In fact, that's why the Victorian government has just banned gun sales completely. Then there's the Morrison government spending $320 billion for welfare and job support to try to get us through this. Some of that spending I, of course, approve of, but it is still 3 times more than what the government spends each year on health and education. How will we keep funding them in the future when we're leaving ourselves a debt like this? And one more thing. How frighteningly quick we've been to surrender freedoms that we once sent soldiers to fight and die for. Now, Australians are being kept virtual prisoners in their own homes, with police in New South Wales today telling people to get out of the parks on this fine autumn day. Stop walking, stop jogging, stop lying on the grass, go home, or risk a fine or even jail. Now, the restrictions on our liberties are astonishing and apply now to almost every state and territory. Look at the restrictions in New South Wales now. A fine or a jail if you're outside, unless you have one of just 16 excuses. Here are the top 10. You can leave home only if you're going to work or childcare, school or university, or going for medical care, or to a wedding or a funeral. There, funeral, only 10 of you can go. You can also go outside if you're moving home or helping a vulnerable person, or if you're donating blood or for some other compassionate reason. And to remind you, all that for a virus that has so far killed just 17 people, and some already dying. Older people that we could perhaps certainly do more to protect instead of jailing the whole population. In fact, in Italy, the scientific advisor to the country's health ministry says only 12% of death certificates of people listed as dying from coronavirus actually showed a direct causality from the virus. The average age of the dead there was about 80. We're not much different, and almost all were already sick. So it is more correct to say that many died with the coronavirus and not from it. And the same in Britain. Scientists there have told the government that possibly two-thirds of the dead were people who would soon have died from the underlying conditions. So to again urge what we must now do, and I know I keep saying this, but it is so critically important. Yes, we should all keep washing our hands. We should be keeping our distance. We should be very careful. We should do more, particularly to quarantine the sick and the elderly, and more to quarantine the people that could infect them, people who already got the virus or have just come from overseas. But then, in a couple of weeks, pull back the devastating restrictions on everyone else. Now, the government is split on this and scared, because it figures, you know, ease up on the restrictions now. Of course, some people are going to keep dying. They already are. And then people will blame it for every extra death. But the government must start preparing people to accept what the figures show, that we are starting to get on top of this virus. Start preparing the ground for the switch. The Health Minister did today cautiously start to do just that.
These early promising signs are your doing. This can be one of our greatest moments as a country.
But Greg Hunt is not yet ready to even talk about changing direction. Not quite yet.
We're actually going, as we've seen in the last 48 hours, harder rather than softer. The measures that had been put in place in the previous 2 and 3 and 4 weeks have begun to yield benefit. The measures that we've just put in place, we hope, will deliver more benefit. And you know, we effectively have the majority of Australians in self-isolation other than for the essential reasons, and work is one of those. But these will, we believe, improve the situation. And the more it improves, the earlier we will be able to start to release those. But now's not the time to contemplate that release. We have to deliver the outcomes to save lives.
Now's not the time, but soon is. The time is fast coming when our governments can afford to change tack. In fact, they'll have to, because of the cost of maintaining this early approach, which we had to at the time, is going to be horrendous in money, in our mental health, and in our freedom.